Hey guys, this is EdRoh. Today we'll be covering a library called React Hook Form and building this particular form with it. I want to make clear that this video isn't about creating a form with React hooks, but rather about a package called React Hook Form. This is a nifty little project that allows you to create quick and easy forms that gets you running with minimal boilerplate. As of 2021, there are a couple form libraries that most people are using, which are React Final Form, Formic, and React Hook Form. Many people are really enjoying the use of React Hook Form though, because it's very easy and the syntax is very intuitive, making it very easy to pick up. One thing I really like is that you don't have to use custom components that the library provides, but rather it's just integrated with hooks that they provide you and make it very simple to understand, and you can just use plain old HTML inputs and integrate them with the library using hooks instead. So it's a very natural way of writing the forms. Now that we know what React Hook Form is, we can start building our form. So the first thing we're going to do is we're going to open up our code editor and we're going to go into our terminal and install create react app via this command, npx create react app, and we are going to call this simple form. Once that's finished installing, we're going to go into our simple form folder and we're going to open it up into a new editor. And we're going to open up our terminal again and we are going to install React Hook Form. And once that's finished installing, we're going to go to our source and we're going to do some cleanup. There's a lot of stuff here we're not going to be using, just so that we can get rid of all this stuff we're probably not going to use, so it's a little cleaner. So I'm going to get rid of app.test.js, logo svg, report web vitals, and setup tests. So we're going to right click, delete that. We're going to go to our index.js. We're going to remove this code and we're going to remove the import for React Web Vitals. And we're going to go to app.js and we're going to remove import logo. And we're going to also remove all this header over here. We're going to save both these files. All right, so once we've cleaned that up, what we're going to do next is going to be adding the CSS. So this is not a CSS tutorial. So I have written out all the CSS you will need for this tutorial, and you can go to it via this link, which will be linked in the description below. And you can go to app.css and you can just copy all this code. You don't have to download it or anything. And you can just go to your app.css file and replace it. Since this is not a CSS tutorial, that's why I've already set the CSS for you, so you can just worry about JavaScript and the form library. Now the next thing we can do is actually start writing our HTML and set up our structure. So the first thing we're going to do is change the class name of this app to container, because that's how I set it up. And I'm also going to add another div, and this class name will be row to give us a flex box type scenario. And finally, we're going to set up two columns. One is going to be the form column, and we're also going to have a column for the image. So it's going to be split between the left and right section with form and then the image. And we're also going to give a div class name of column over here. So that represents that, and also another one for the image column. And finally, I'm going to give one more div. I promise this is the last div. A lot of this is necessary to set up the structure properly for the flexbox, by the way. And this will format everything properly and give us the right structure. Okay. And we're going to write some simple HTML text, contact us. and a paragraph tag with a random description, like so. And now we can actually finally write our forms. So I'm going to give it a lot of space just to show and give us proper organization. All right. I'm going to create the form first, like so. Okay. And the next thing we're going to do is we're going to start importing. So we're going to import use form from React hook form, like that. This is the hook that is the main driver for the package and allows us to do and create our forms easily. So we're going to destructure and grab a few things. We're going to grab register, handle submit, form state, and from the form state we're going to grab the errors value, and we're going to destructure it from use form. And we are also going to create an onSubmit function. So as the name entails, this is the function that will be run when we submit the application. So when the application gets submitted, we are going to console log all the data that's in the form, and this is how you would do it. And you can use that with the onSubmit property or data attribute in the form. So we do handle submit and we pass in our onSubmit function. This is basically what connects our form with the package library. All right, and then the next thing we're going to do, I'm going to comment. I like making some comments here because we're going to have a pretty big form here, or a lot of code in here. It's mostly in JSX is where a lot of the logic is going to be. So the first thing we're going to do is create a little label. And I'm going to give it a class name of input label. And pass it name and a star because it's going to be required. And so this is where the beauty of React hook form comes into play. So with other libraries, this particular form, HTML tag, is generally its own component from the package library. So it would have its own properties or props that you would have to pass in. But the beauty of React hook form is that you don't have to worry about that. You can just use a normal form. You don't have to learn any new syntax for this particular library. And furthermore, we're going to create an input. So input, like a normal HTML tag. So we don't have to do anything in regards to using their specific library function. All right, so from there, we're going to add a class name of input. Give it a type equals text. Placeholder equals name. This is a normal input tag. However, the new part that you would use with React hook form is that you would pass and destructure, or no, sorry, spread our properties from the register from here. So whatever this passes in, we are going to just pass or spread this particular function. And this function takes in a couple parameters. So it's going to take the name that you want it to connect to. So in this case, I'm just going to do it lowercase name. And I'm just going to pass in an object. So this object is going to be the things that do validation for you. It's going to check whatever you want it to be. And there's a couple things that are here that you can use. That's part of the libraries. But for this one, we're going to do required because we want it to be always existing. So we're going to start with that. I'm going to add another one, but first I want to show you how this can work. So to work this, you can do errors.name. And basically, anytime the errors.name does not exist, which means when you don't have a value, we won't be able to show an error. So I'm going to pass in a span like so. Span. And I'm going to give the class name of error because I already configured that CSS. And in this span, I'm going to write this out to give you a better viewpoint of what type of errors we're going to be handling. So if errors.name.type is equal to required, then we are going to show that this field is required. So this is a lot to take in, but essentially what's happening is that when you submit the application, and if the user did not type anything, we are going to have a value in errors.name. And in that errors.name is going to have a type of required because this particular error handled by the library is going to be triggered. And once we know that that error is happening, we can customize the error that we want to write. So a better way for me to do is to show you actually what's happening. So let's run this. Okay, so when we run it, we're going to get something like this. I realized we forgot the submit button. So we need the submit button so we can actually check our validation. So we're going to create a little comment, say submit. I'm going to add a div. And we're going to give an input class name of submit and a type of submit and the value of send message. So this will allow us to have a submit value. And we're going to add a couple console logs. Or actually we have the console log for the data, but I also want to console log our errors object just to see what our errors are. I'm going to give it a string of errors so we can see which one is the error. And after that, I'm going to save. I'm also going to move this to this half so we can actually see it together like so. So first off, let's clear these warnings. And what I'm going to do, I'm going to first check if the data works. So if we put in a name of Ed, we have the data right here. And we have nothing in our errors object. However, if I empty it out, we're going to get the error right here. So as you can see, the errors.name.type is equal to required. So anytime this field is empty or the message is empty, then we're going to trigger this particular string, and it's going to say this field is required. And anytime you type, the error goes away. So this is a very default handling of forms, and most forms do this type of method. So if you have a new form, it's never going to trigger an error until you submit it, and the error is going to show. So this is very standard, and React Hook form does a good job in making sure this standard is applied. And now what if you also want a max length of 80? So we can do that by having this property here. And we can also trigger another error by saying errors.name.type is going to be equal to, what was it, max length. And we can write the error is max length of name is 80 char. So something like that. So now we have two different types of errors, and they will show a different message based on the error type that we have. So if I save it, I'm going to refresh this page. I'm going to do 0, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9. So we can see how many we paste. So I'm going to paste this 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10. 10 times. So now, as you can see, once I paste it, it's going to show this error. So instead of showing the required error, it's actually showing the max length right here. And this is kind of beautiful. You have an easy way of handling your errors, and you can configure it any way you want. All right, and it's that easy just to set up an input with error validation. This looks like a lot, but it's not really, because when you actually use other libraries, or if you're creating your own form, you would have to have a lot of logic to deal with this. But this is very intuitive, and you have a lot of custom say on how to build this. So we're going to create another one just so you can get a better understanding. We're going to call it email. And we're just going to copy this entire thing because it's very similar. And we're going to change all the values. Email over here. Give it a placeholder email. Change the register input to email. And we're going to copy all of these with Command D. And we're going to go email like so. And when we're going to change this register, and we're going to have a pattern instead. So this is a regex that we can pass in for email validation. So I'm going to copy over a regex expression that I found on Stack Overflow before, and I will put it in the description if you want to copy that. But this will validate for emails if it's correct or not. And then we're going to change this particular error because we want to keep the required one, but we want to change this particular one. And this is going to be pattern, which is based on this property. And we are going to say invalid email address like so. So when we save it, we're going to see a new one. Let's type in ed. And if it's empty, this is going to show this field is required. And if you start typing, it's going to say invalid until you have the proper format, like so. You need this particular one. So anytime you mess that up, then it's going to give you that particular error. Super simple. All right, we're going to do another one. And we're going to copy that over. We're going to write phone number and copy that over. And call this phone. This one, I'm not going to make it required, so I'm not going to have the star. Give it a placeholder of phone number. Pass in phone number over here. And make sure we change these email values to phone number. Oops. Dot phone number. And I, in this case, don't need multiple errors. So what I'm going to do is I'm just going to say invalid phone number. And this error, since we're going to remove this required. Oops, I spelled phone number wrong. So make sure that's connected correctly. If this pattern is triggered, since this is the only error, we don't need to do the type is equal to something. We can just have this particular error trigger because this is the only error that exists, so we can be okay with that. Oh, and by the way, this regex expression, we have to change it. I have another one that I found. This one's a lot longer, but I will also leave this in the description if you want to use it. So this is a phone number validation that I found as well. So ed@gmail.com. So if we send message, this phone number is not going to trigger because it is not required. But yeah, if we start typing and it's invalid, we're going to trigger the phone number validation. So until you have the proper values and the proper setup, it's going to give you that particular error. Okay. And finally, we're going to do one more. And it's kind of redundant at this point, but this is part of the form. So we're going to create a message one. I'm going to copy that over. I'm going to change this to message. This will be required. And we are going to give a placeholder of write your message. And we are going to pass in message for the first one. Change this. It's going to just be required true. So in this case, this is all we need. And we're going to have errors dot message. And if that message is invalid or there's nothing in there, we're going to say this field is required, like usual. And there you go. This error gets triggered. Now we basically have our entire form. And that's pretty much all the form part of it. We're going to add an image over here. Oops. And we are going to add a div. No, sorry, an image tag. Let's make sure this is indented properly. And we are going to pass in a source. And I found an image from Unsplash. And again, I will link this in the description. But basically, if you want this image, you can go to unsplash.com. And that's where you can grab any photo. And any photo for free. So, and also we need an alt, and we're going to call this living room. And once we have that, we have our form. I know it's all scrunched up, but let's close this. And as you can see, if I move this over, now we have our entire form. And we have all the particular setup. We haven't cleared it. I'm not going to bother with that, but I'm sure it's pretty easy for you to figure out how you can clear these values once we submit the message. If you don't have any value in name, you're going to trigger an error, and you're going to have email. And if it's not correctly formatted, that's going to trigger an error as well. And so on and so forth. And that was React Hook Form. Very simple to use. I certainly recommend it. The inputs and the HTML and JSX is very simple because you just use plain old HTML and JSX logic and you just connect it to the hook form, so you don't have to use all the crazy syntax of the custom components that you have to import from other libraries. If it's a simple and medium level form, I would highly suggest using this library. If you're dealing with very complex forms, possibly you can get away with using this packaged library. I just don't know if you might run into a very niche scenario, a very specific scenario that only you might encounter. And React Hook Form is relatively new, so they might not have been able to fix those scenarios. If you have a really complex form with multiple pages, or you have very custom validation needs, then maybe you would just make your own. Otherwise, React Hook Form will cover you most of the way. Anyways, comment below, like, and subscribe if you enjoyed this video, and I will see you next time.